Hello, 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 and good morning. Good morning, North Central. On behalf of the North Central Chamber of Commerce, I'm pleased to welcome you to the Good Morning Breakfast Series. And I'm Steve Rochelo, President of Rochelo Tool in Fitchburg and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the North Central Chamber. And with me this morning, I'm happy to introduce our guest MC, Leanne Scales, who's the Vice President of Enrollment and Public Affairs at Mount Wachusett Community College.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. You guys all look great. So way to go for looking this good this early in the morning. I am delighted to be a member of this chamber, and one of the things I like best about it is not only the number of events, but the incredible variety of events. Steve, what's coming up?
We have a lot of great things coming up. November 12th, the Human Resource Council will present an important topic on active shooter protocol with Officer Kalinowski from the Fitchburg Police Department at the Chamber Conference Room. In just 1 week, on November 14th, is the Mega Chamber Business After Hours at our host and sponsor site, Great Wolf Lodge, a great event with over 300 companies attending. So that's one you want to definitely put on your calendar. November 19th is the Small Business Roundtable, and they'll be discussing marketing your business for the holidays with Michelle Miller of the Women's Center for Women in Enterprise, Rebecca Beaton and Susan Bachman from Fidelity Bank, which is also the sponsor for the series. On December 4th, our Women's Leadership Connection will be meeting here at the Doubletree by Hilton, discussing owning your own business with Sherry Keating and Andrea Seward. And on December 5th, we're holding our popular winter reception at Mount Wachusett Ski Area. The event features an open bar, appetizers, spectacular views, and attendees can end the night with hot cocoa, all sponsored by AIS here of Leominster. And of course, there's a lot more events that are on the schedule, and all of them can be viewed online at northcentralmass.com, where you can also register as well.
Thank you. So earlier this week, I know all of you voted, and we have elected officials who we would like to recognize this morning. I also want to recognize everyone who ran for office and thank you. That is a very difficult job, to be a volunteer public servant in your city, your town, your state, the Commonwealth. So thank you for your service. Of course, as you know, Governor Charlie Baker will be joining us later. We'll recognize him. And the first elected official I want to recognize is having a special day today, Senator Dean Tran. It's your birthday, so happy birthday, Senator Tran. And I want to thank Senator Tran for his support of the college and also higher education. And fun fact, he served on our Board of Trustees before he was in the Senate. And Representative Stephen Hay, I haven't seen him yet, but I know he's coming. Mayor Steve DiNatale, nice to see you. And from Leominster, Mayor Dean Mazzarella. Kathleen Reynolds Dagenall from North Worcester County Registry of Deeds. Councilor Michael Kushmarek of Fitchburg. Councilor Sam Squally of Fitchburg. Amy Green of Fitchburg. There she is. Councilor Marissa Fleming of Fitchburg. There she is. Councilor Elizabeth Walsh of Fitchburg. Councilor David Cormier of Leominster. And Select Board Member James Delisle of Westminster. And because we just had an election this week, I want to make sure I don't forget an elected official who's here today. And my friend Kat Deal's got a microphone, so if I missed your name, my apologies. Could you stand if I have missed anyone in elective office? Kat, you did perfect.
Wait.
Well, okay.
Kat? We have one.
We have one right over there. What? Also a veteran. Thank you for your service.
And
sir.
wait, one more.
And one more.
And one One more. Who else happens to be our speaker today?
Mark Bodanza, Ward 4, Leominster.
Oh. And I'm going to save the best for last because he's at Mount Wachusett Community College. We have a Center for Civic Engagement named after him, Senator Stephen Brewer. And now it is my distinct honor to recognize this morning's sponsor. She is an innovative leader. She is tireless. I wish all of us had her energy. I am proud to serve on her foundation board. From Monty Tech, the great high school in our region, please welcome Superintendent Sheila Harity. Sheila, do you want to hold this or do you want it in? That's perfect. That's what I figured.
Thank you.
So nice to see you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the warm welcome. Monty Tech is so proud to be the sponsor here for this morning's chamber breakfast. Quite frankly, it gives us an opportunity to profile our school, our student success, and also to encourage you to partner with Monty Tech. And also it gives us an opportunity to thank you for all of the support that you have given our school throughout the years. So we put together a quick little PowerPoint. We put together, on cue, a PowerPoint. I'm having flashbacks of last year, if anyone was here. Pushing every button. Anybody? So Monty Tech is actually the second largest regional vocational school. There we are. Thank you. I appreciate it. Monty Tech is the second largest regional vocational school in Massachusetts. We actually represent 18 communities, 2 gateway cities, Fitchburg and Gardner, and 16 towns all the way to the New Hampshire border. So it's very extremely diverse. And here's some of the towns that we have that we service. In addition to that, we have 21 different technical programs that we offer Chapter 74 training to our students that have industry-recognized credentials embedded into the program as well as college credits. It's very important that we have you as our committee members. We actually have 400 program advisory members that help us keep a finger on the pulse of what's expected of our Monty Tech graduates. You tell us exactly what types of curriculum, equipment we should be purchasing, what type of industry-recognized credentials should be embedded within our technical programs. You're also a wonderful partner when it's time to give various equipment donations, take our students for co-op, internships, career speakers, field trips. The list is very lengthy. And at this time, too, I want to recognize our Monty Tech administrative team. They're here this morning, and if you'd like to partner with us, Jim Hashey, I asked Jim to bring a stack of his business cards. So if you'd like to partner with our school, we'd love to have you. In addition to that, I'm really thrilled, and it gives us a chance to say thank you so much to our state legislators and Senator Tron and Steve Hayes. We really appreciate your support. There's a line item for Skills Capital Grant for vocational education as well as for community colleges. And Monty Tech is very fortunate that so far we've received in 4 years almost $1.5 million in grant funds. And it truly is changing the face of how we're training our students, because we truly have the latest equipment and technologies embedded in 7 of our programs just from this line item. So we're thrilled and couldn't thank you enough. The first, and again, we'll continue to thank you, we raised $2.6 million in private sector donations. Many from you gave a donation to this important project. Our own construction students built the veterinary clinic at our school, and we're servicing families in our 18 communities that are struggling financially, aren't able to actually provide very good health care and medical attention to their animals. In addition, through the grant opportunity, $136,000 was actually used from this Skills Capital Grant to actually purchase many of the major equipment items in the clinic. In addition, in 2017, we were awarded $435,000, and this is actually for our machine tech program. We partnered with Snap-on Tools, Starrett, and Haas, and actually bought 4 brand new CNC machines, as well as built a clean room. And we embedded industry-recognized credentials, the NC3, AMI and PMI Snap-on certifications. And I'm really proud to share too, not only are the investments that are made during the day for our high school students, they're also being implemented in the evening as well. So we're thrilled. These are all the various bullets below between the 2 pictures of the industry recognized credentials that our students during the day in our evening program are earning, thanks again to the line item for the capital equipment. In May of 2018, we received a $500,000 grant to open an ARM lab, an automation mechatronic robotics lab. And it truly is an incredible state-of-the-art facility, and it's aligned to our electrical and engineering and our computer-aided design programs. And this really is an opportunity for us to train our students in a highly needed area in our North Central Mass region for the workforce development. This came directly from you. You had told us that this is an area that we are struggling in and are not able to continue to meet the workforce needs in our region. So we answered the call, wrote the grant, and were very successful. We actually, you might have seen it in the paper, 2 weeks ago we had the ribbon cutting, and the Lieutenant Governor came out to join us for that beautiful ceremony. In August of 2019, we received $384,000, and this is for our health programs and our auto tech program. We were able to buy an animatage table. You can see it right down here. It's incredible. It's truly, and you'll continue to hear me say state of the art. This table is all computerized and has all the different types of anatomies of the human body as well as various animals. We can use it for the vet tech. And you can see the skeleton, the tissues, the nerves, the muscles, and so forth, as it's very interactive. And we're redesigning our auto tech program aligned to NATEP standards by incorporating a brand new auto lab incorporated into the auto program. In addition to that, we ask you to join us if you're interested in taking any of our second semester juniors or seniors into your business. You're essential to our workforce training programs. It's one thing that our students are learning their specific skills at our school, but our school certainly is beyond the 4 walls of our building. We have between 155 to 165 students out on co-op, which during their vocational week they can work for you full-time, and our students are earning between $12 and $16. One year in electrical, our students were earning $25 an hour. Can you imagine $25 as a 17-year-old? Sky's the limit, right? So we have 85 different companies that already have our students. And again, please see Jim Hashey after. We'll just keep that theme going, right, Jim? Raise your hand again, Jim. With the nice purple shirt. See Jim after if you'd like to join our co-op program. And as you can see, our goal is always to create that workforce pipeline, because if our students in their junior or senior year are working for you, then you're helping with their training and their workforce plan. And if you'd like to hire our students upon graduation for summer employment, or if they're going on to college for additional training in their technical program, they can work for you part-time. So it's a great opportunity to get involved. In addition, we've really expanded our evening program. Monty Tech literally is training adults, over 1,800 adults. You'll see last spring it's over 700 and over 1,000. We have adults in training and retraining programs Monday through Thursday till 10 o'clock at night. So it's really incredible that the school, because of these investments with equipment and technology, it just doesn't make sense to close the building at 3 o'clock. There's so many needs in our region, and it gives also the students that don't get accepted into Monty Tech an opportunity to be able to engage in For instance, we have 275 adults in plumbing and electrical journeyman apprenticeship programs in our evening. We have 3 sections of welding. We have 2 sections of construction supervisor. There's so many various programs where adults can come to our school and get trained and retrained to meet your employment needs. In addition, every single semester we're challenged to introduce various new courses and programs and training, again, driven by your needs. And we'll be willing to also come out to your company if you're interested in having specific training for your workforce. We can hire instructors and come directly to your site, or offer it at our school and access the equipment and technology. We're also very happy to be partnered with Mass Hire and the North Central Workforce with the grant for the manufacturing training and the welding courses. So we always appreciate your partnership, as well as our partnership with Mount Wachusett Community College. Here's additional, through grant dollars, we're able to offer oil burner sections. We have 25 since this program just started this year. It's offered during the day and the evening. We have over 25 adults that have already gone through the oil burner certification, and 35 adults have gone through the manufacturing MassWIC certifications and credentialing, again, to meet our workforce needs. If you're in the healthcare, we wanted to say thank you. In addition to many of the construction trades that we have the workforce needs in, we also have various courses in the health area. And as you can see, we've expanded these programs and created and strengthened our partnerships with the hospitals and providers in North Central Mass to give our students the opportunity to not only earn that credential, but also that hands-on experience. And that way we're connecting the dots with our students to you so that they can do their job shadowing and do some type of internship experience with you. So then if you'd like to hire them after, it would be a wonderful opportunity to be partners with you. In addition, we have a practical nurses program that has been very successful for so many years. We have 40 students that graduate as practical nurses in a very intensive 10-month program with a 100% placement rate. So very, very impressive. The rigor is there, and the accomplishments are great. I lastly want to leave you with this last slide. Monty Tech can't do it alone. We need to partner with you. We want to thank our state legislators, our higher ed, our workforce board, and all our business partners that help us continue to provide truly cutting-edge training and workforce development in our region. We started last year a career expo for our day students and our evening programs. And if you want to participate in those programs and be part of this career expo, we'd love to have you, because we actually have everybody in the cafeteria and our students and our adults come to our school for this career expo so that you can hire students on the spot. Thank you so much. We're, again, very proud to be a partner with the Chamber. And if you'd like to partner with Monty Tech, please see Jim Hashey in the purple shirt. Thank you.
Isn't she great? We're so lucky to have her. So now I would like to welcome our first guest this morning. He is a local author, and I think many of you have read several of his books. So please join me in welcoming Mark Bodanza. Happy to say good morning, wherever you want. So good morning, everybody. So I think many of you have heard from and met Mark before, and I'm not sure if everybody knows everything about him. Well, maybe a small group. But Mark is an attorney, he's a historian, he's an author of several books. So tell me a little bit about how those different parts of your life came into what you're doing right now today.
Well, my journey as an author is really quite an accident. Back in 2009, 10 years ago, I had this crazy notion that we would convert the Doyle pasture up on Lindell Avenue to a 19th century football field and get a group of semi-pro football players to play a game 1894 style, which back then was no equipment. And I fully thought that the trustees of reservations that control the land would tell me I was crazy. But they actually endorsed the idea. So several months later, it was like planning a wedding. We had that game. We had 1,000 people show up in the pouring rain. I had an NFL coach, a local man, Frank Novak, who attended the game, and he told me it was the most greatest football game he had ever seen. Of course, in 1894, the game was played a little differently, let's say, and I wanted to write a program to see, to tell people what they were watching. So I did that, and I was finding so much material that had been obscured and long buried. I decided to turn it into a book that I thought would sell 100 copies to my family and friends. By the way, I think it's like 95% of the books published in the United States don't sell more than 100 copies. And I think the book sold almost 2,000 copies just in the local Barnes & Noble store.
That's
So
awesome.
that's how things get started.
That is amazing. So your new book is fascinating. It's Risk Takers and History Makers. And I know everybody in this room knows Johnny Appleseed, because you can't be a member of the Chainer and not know Johnny Appleseed, thanks to Roy and his team. But Leominster's history is so much, deeper and richer than I think many people realize. And there's two characters in your book in particular I'd like to hear about. Let's talk about the first. He was elected governor and had a long year of service, and was, of course, like many of our leaders, an immigrant. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, the story of David Walsh, who was born in Leominster in 1872, was a fascinating one. He was elected lieutenant governor of Massachusetts in 1911, and 7,000 people showed up in Monument Square in Leominster to celebrate this. And he lived here till he was 8 years old, so for that kind of following, that was a big deal. 2 years later, 1913, he was elected governor. And he did it, he was one of the first to travel the entire state. He visited every city and town in Massachusetts by train, by trolley, by boat, and by the automobile. It was a remarkable campaign, of course. 1918, he was elected to the US Senate, and he served a term in the Senate. He went to the convention, the Democratic Convention in 1924, championing a plank in the platform against the Ku Klux Klan, and he was shot down because the Klan was pretty popular in Massachusetts in 1924, and he lost his Senate bid largely because of that. 2 years later, the man that beat him left office, and he ran in a special election, was elected, and served in the US Senate till 1947. Many of you may not know that there were more Klan members in Massachusetts in 1924 than there were in states like Alabama and Mississippi, and of course here, the object of their ire were Catholics and Jews. In Leominster in 1924, on Easter night, they actually burned a cross on Joslin Street on the top of that promontory. So not a happy chapter in our history, but we told the whole story. Interestingly, later on, Senator Walsh ran afoul of Franklin Roosevelt. Before that time, he was thought to be tapped to a U.S. Supreme Court seat, but he opposed the Democratic Party many times. He opposed his own party. He opposed the court packing plan by Roosevelt in 1932, and he wasn't on Franklin Roosevelt's Christmas card list, let's say.
But there's also deep abolitionist history in Leominster. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've been championing a lady named Frances Drake now for a number of years. I took a graduate history course at Fitchburg State a number of years ago, and we had a brilliant professor who told me that Shadrach Minkins was in Leominster, and I have to confess I had no idea who that was. Well, Shadrach Minkins was the first test case under the Compromise of 1850's New Fugitive Slave Law in New England, and he came through Leominster. His rescue was in part helped by a lady named Frances Drake. So when you start peeling back the onion, what you find out about Frances Drake is not only was she an ardent abolitionist, but she was, she was in favor of gender equality, racial equality and gender equality when those things weren't in vogue. In fact, the idea of gender equality was more radical in the 1850s than freeing slaves. Hard for us in modern times to wrap our head around that, but that's a fact. And almost all abolitionists wanted to end, of course, they wanted to end slavery, but they weren't willing to talk about gender equality, that's for sure. She was willing to do both things. She was a pariah in her own community as a result of it, but it didn't stop her. And she fought the cause of women to her last breath, which was in September of 1900 when she passed.
That's fascinating. And another immigrant in your book that I think folks here may have heard about, but tell us a little bit about a major economic driver for this city, so the plastics industry, not just here, but in the world. So a leader in that business.
Well, Bernard Doyle, like David Walsh, was born to Irish immigrant parents. 1 year later, he was born in 1873, 1 year after David Walsh. He was born in the Plains section of Leominster, which is near Doyle Field, which was an Irish enclave at the time. Senator Walsh was born, Governor Walsh was born in Morse Hollow, which is over by the sort of south side of the high school. He went to Leominster High School, graduated in 1891, Bernard Doyle did, and then he went to the Eastman Business School in Poughkeepsie, New York, graduated a couple of years later, became a bookkeeper for a Horn and Supply Company. Now, back in those days, most of the combs and novelties were being made by Horn, and they were literally denuding all of the Horn in America, so they were trying to buy it on other exchanges, most notably the London Exchange. This was a commodity of those years. So his employer sent him to London to learn how to buy Argentine horn, if you can imagine that, on the London Exchange for their business. While over there, he took a side trip to Paris and watched celluloid being made, which was an early plastic compound. He came back here, he talked his employer and a couple other gentlemen into a partnership, which became the Viscaloid Company. By 1901, they were in business. They were not just manufacturing plastic novelties or articles, they were manufacturing the raw material to sell it to the 40 or so other manufacturers in the city, and he created a whole industry. By 1925, DuPont bought him out. As they say, the rest is sort of history. Fascinating story. Sam Foster, most of you will remember that name, got his start in that company, the Viscaloid Company. 1919, he starts Foster Company, becomes Foster Grant. And anybody know who Grant was? I'll bet you not very many people do, unless you maybe read my book. Well, Grant was a salesman that wanted part of the company. He wasn't satisfied just to be an employee, so he purchased his way into the company. The relationship only lasted 6 months. They dissolved the partnership, and Sam Foster didn't have enough money to amend the corporate articles, so they just left the name. So, that iconic name, who's behind those Foster Grants, Bill Grant was a guy that was with the company just for literally months.
Wow, smart. So now, obviously, this is a passion for you, because this is your 9th book.
Yes.
So, and you've done exhaustive research, and it's not simple. Can you talk about how you go about finding out all the information about Leominsters and our region's, giants and telling their story?
Well, every book's a little different, but I find stuff in dusty old bins and at the Historical Society, at the Historical Commission, the library's valuable collection, newspapers, which are now digitized for the most part, which are valuable resources, primary source materials, whether they be diaries or letters, all sorts of places. It's a detective story. Mm-hmm. And what I enjoy is ferreting this stuff out. Some of it is remarkable, and like I said earlier, no one it hasn't seen the light of day, sometimes in a century or more. And my passion is to share it with people. It belongs to us all. And if I'm getting excited by it, I'm sort of fair guess that maybe some other people would be excited by it, and that's my goal, to share it with the public.
And tell me a little bit about not only how you research it, but how do you, because obviously it's a big lift to get them published. You mentioned your sales earlier, so a big part of your life must be spent, marketing and the business side of your writing.
Yeah, just to tell, when you start writing, the questions you get when you do a book signing are, what's next? What are you writing next? You could have just finished the book 10 minutes before, and people want to know what you're doing next. Many people have a book. They've been working on it for years. They've been thinking about writing a book for years. They don't know how to get it published. These are the kind of questions you get. So, some authors will tell you the writing part's the easy part, and that's very true. Usually it takes longer to get the book published than it does to write it, at least for me. But I learned a lot over the years, and and the industry changes. It's changing dramatically. When we built the library edition in Leominster, some naysayers said, you don't need to spend the money on that. People aren't reading books anymore. People are on the internet. Well, let me tell you, 25 years ago, there were 250,000 books published a year in the United States. Now it's well over 1 million. So it's going the other way. And it's a more egalitarian process because more people can publish books today than they could 25 years ago,
Right.
because there are several ways to do it. So I've actually created my own imprint. I have my own team. I have my own editors, proofreaders. I have my own designers, my own printers, and I do it from the bottom up. I deal directly with companies like Barnes & Noble, and it's been a very enlightening process, not just from the writing side, but from the business side of it as well.
So as someone who started my career out as a writer and a journalist, what fascinates me about you is that your writing style is very accessible, you tell a great story, you spin a great yarn. But you started your career as an attorney, and from my attorney friends, they focus on language for sure, but their language is specific and technical because you want to make sure that your client, whether it's a business or a person, has language that they can rely on in a courtroom, right?
Yeah.
So, but you have somehow managed both of those writing styles in your life, which I think is pretty extraordinary for people who are writing.
Well,
can you talk about that?
You know, I was once deposed by a fellow in a patent case, and it was his first trial. And he had been working for that large firm in Boston for, I think, 8 years at that point. And he said to me, "How many cases have you tried?" In fact, it was one of the questions. And I think at that time in my career, I was probably into the business about 10 years, and I think I had tried about 300 cases. And I think I tried my first jury trial about the second month I was a lawyer. And I didn't think there was anything unusual about that, but apparently he did. And when you approach a jury, it's always about believability. People either believe you or they don't. Plain speaking, getting to the point, digesting the case, dissecting it to the least common denominator, that's what it's about. And if you can't communicate with that jury and let them know what the point is, then they don't want to hear a bunch of flowery language that has nothing to do with what they need, the tools they need to get to a decision.
Right. So your book's about history, and I love that you're focused on history. I was at a conference last week, and there was a speaker, and he's been in higher education for 50 years, retired from Harvard, and his specialty is higher education administration. And they said, well, what do you suggest we read and study? And everybody was waiting for the next new big thing in education administration, and he didn't say that. He said, study American history. And he said, every single problem that you've had, we've had before. The example he gave was a case that he taught at Harvard about a raging discussion about whether higher education should be focused on technical education or liberal arts. And the case that he taught in 1960 was based on a real story from Yale from 1882. So we have been discussing that balance in higher education for all those years. And everybody in this room, their leadership, whether it's in business or education, what lessons can we learn in this room from the history that our region has already faced?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's all happened before. Human nature doesn't change. So, technology changes, but the basic innate parts of us as human beings, the things that we like, don't like, the way we position ourselves, all those things never change. I remember, reading in the early 19th century a fight over whether they should build a school in North Leominster. And ironically, the fellow that was most against it was a local industrialist who moved out of town, came back to town later in life, and had an epiphany. It was like a Charles Dickens moment, and he's the guy that donated the money to build Kendall Hall, which was partly a school. So he had a 180-degree reversal. In the 50s in Leominster, there was a big fight over whether to build a new elementary school, and then where, what part of the town. And finally, they built Northwest School, and then they built the school in North Leominster, and the poor people in South Leominster had to wait another 10 years. But that fight was amazing. And you don't think, you hear about those things in local politics today, and you think that this is new, this is a virulent attitude and atmosphere, but it's all happened before.
It's all happened before. Well, you have your book here today, right?
I do.
All right, so please buy his book. And thank you, Mark, for
Thank
talking
you.
to North Central. Thank you so much. Great job. So it's now my honor to represent someone who talked about earlier, and it's his birthday. So please join me in welcoming our friend, supporter of education and the region, Senator Dean Tran.
Good morning, North Central Massachusetts. It's great to see so many familiar faces this morning. It's great to see two of my favorite mayors here today, Mayor DiNatale, Mayor Mazzarella. And it's a good thing that Mayor Hawk is not here, because when you put three of them in one room, it's like Animal House. Just want to say congratulations to both of them for their incredible re-elections. I'm here today, this morning, to introduce to you someone who really needs no introduction. You know, there's a saying that it's good to have friends in high places. Well, my relationship with him is truly that. He's 6'5" and I'm 5'6" and 9 millimeter tall. You know, the latest poll shows that he is the most popular governor in the country at 73%. Now, 73%, I'm not saying I'm jealous by any means, but he makes my life very difficult. And let me tell you why. I had a bill that I wanted to file several weeks ago. And it's the anti-mask bill. You know, you can't disguise yourself and beat on other people, especially cops. And I hesitated in filing it, not until the Telegram did a poll. And the poll came out, the results was 75% approval. And I was like, God, sigh of relief. So I filed it because it's higher than his approval rating. So all joking aside, I am extremely grateful to have his friendship and to have him as my governor. Since elected, he has produced 4 balanced budgets, increased the state's bonding rating, created over 230,000 jobs, and brought the rainy day fund from $1.2 billion to now $3.3 billion. And that's incredible, unprecedented. He has placed a focus on every issue that has an impact on our lives on a daily basis, including education funding, fighting the opioid epidemic, increase affordable housing, fix our transportation infrastructure, and Governor, don't forget Route 2, and implemented the Community Compact Act, which is incredibly crucial and critical to helping our communities moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, with great honor, I would like to introduce to you my friend, your 72nd governor, Governor Baker.
So good morning, everybody. Let me start by saying, Dean, that I would have been disappointed if that poll had turned out differently, because I'm with you. If someone wants to put on a mask and go out and beat somebody up, that probably should be against the law. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here this morning, and I found this conversation quite interesting for a couple of reasons. We constantly talk about this issue about tech education versus liberal arts. We talk about educating the whole person versus giving somebody skills. And I sort of concluded that I think the right answer to this is both and not either or. I know that's a lot harder to deliver on in the grand scheme of things, and it kind of takes the argument away, which is no fun for everybody who likes to have it. But the simple truth is, if I learned anything over the course of the past several years, listening to, talking to people in education and in business, it's pretty clear that there's a STEM element to practically everything at this point. And that's because if you think about it, you know, science, technology, engineering, and math are really mostly about tools. And the way I described this to a group of high school kids I was talking to about this issue is I said, how many of you in here get in arguments about stats? Practically every kid in the room, boy anyway, raised their hand. And I said, and what kind of stats do you argue about? And so they would talk about, you know, OBP and CBS and BDP and whatever it was. And I said, I got news for you folks. None of those stats that you're talking about even existed when I was your age. And the reason they didn't exist when I was your age is because nobody had the tools to actually calculate any of that stuff. And so what's happened over the course of time is the tools have gotten better. People have been able to keep track of things that they viewed as being more granular and more relevant and more important to success than the tools they used when I was a kid. And I said, that is STEM. And I went through like a whole series of examples of just ways in which, if you think about it as a both and not as a either or, simple truth of the matter, most of those skills, one way or another, are going to find their way into something you do. And that's a much, I think, better way to think about this. And a big part of the reason why we've been investing in organizations like Monty Tech. Hi, Sheila, how are you? I understand you're sponsoring this morning's breakfast. You know, the best advice I can give you about Sheila is whatever it is she says that she's interested in doing, you should just say yes. Because any other answers, you're just wasting your time. And I know the Lieutenant Governor was out here last week to celebrate a grant through our Skills Capital Grant Program to Monty Tech. And we've probably done, I don't know, $65 million of grants, thanks to the legislature, to vocational and technical schools, community colleges, and other skill-building organizations over the past 4 years. And those grants mostly have been about trying to help those organizations either upgrade popular programs they have or expand them, or in some cases, to partner with local employers around educational opportunities that are viewed as ones where there's a hot opportunity, and if the education and skill building folks could get deeper into this space, there would be more opportunity for folks coming out of those programs to get hired. And that's turned out in many respects to be a terrific way for us to partner with really great organizations like yours. So I got this off the table, right? You sponsored, I said nice things about you. I'm good for the next, 6-8 months until the next time we have a round. And Senator Tran, what I would just say, I started my electoral career I worked in the Weldon Cellucci administrations back in the 90s in cabinet positions at Health and Human Services and Administration and Finance, but I got my electoral start as a member of the Select Board in Swampscott, and I know you started as a member of the City Council in Fitchburg, and I tell people all the time that I ran for the Board of Selectmen because I didn't have the strength or the stomach for school committee. That's much harder. And I was talking earlier with Mayor DiNatale, and I asked him, a lot of the mayors in many of our city charters in Massachusetts are also the chairs of their school committee. And I asked him if that was the case with him, and he said yes. And I just said, wow, that's a lot. But the bottom line is local government. Lieutenant Governor also started her career as a member of the Select Board in Shrewsbury. And there are a number of other folks Mayor Mazzarella went even deeper. He started as a police officer before he became an elected official. But the bottom line is if you start in local communities, one of the things you realize is that there's nothing in public life that's as accountable as serving the community you live in, because your constituents are your neighbors. In many cases, their kids play on the same sports teams or participate in the same after-school activities as your kids do. They show up in many of the same restaurants and the same coffee shops and the same places where you pick up dry cleaning or whatever it might be. They're on the same fields as you're on. So you are completely and utterly transparent and available. And I always thought it was great training for anybody who wanted to be in public life. But I also came to believe that if you're thinking about the job that we have at the state level the right way, what you're thinking about is what is it that you're doing that's actually helping communities succeed. Because the other thing you learn is that most people judge how things are going, not based on how things are going on Beacon Hill, or even in some cases how things are going in Washington, because that's far away and we all have our own views about that. I'm just glad I'm here. Most people make that decision based on how things are going in their community. It's their community where they raise their children. It's their community where most of their sort of day-to-day interactions are. The regions typically represent where most people work. And so we tried very hard to create an administration that was focused on enabling communities to be successful. And Dean mentioned the Community Compact Program. And that started as just a very simple idea. Let's create a menu of best practices, give cities and towns an opportunity to pick off the menu if they choose to. If they pick something they want to work on that's on that menu, we'll provide them with technical assistance and financial support to actually do the work that's that. And if they work on them and they succeed, they'll get points when they bid on state grants. No idea if anybody would even play. Okay, it was our first executive order. The Lieutenant Governor chaired the Compact Program. All 351 cities and towns within a year or so were participating, and they've worked on over 1,000 best practices. And it's gotten to the point now where literally if a community comes across something they think is interesting, they tee it up to us and say, we think this should be on the list. And then we throw it on the list and it becomes the next best practice that people work on. And it also led to the modernization legislation we passed for cities and towns. And this is, sort of weed whacking stuff, and I get that. But I don't think people appreciate how important some of this work can be. And this modernization legislation, this was the first update of state legislation relative to cities and towns that have been passed in over 50 years. So much of the administrative, procedural, and sort of requirements that cities and towns operated under state law predated the computer. So you had cities and towns doing all kinds of stuff that they were required to do under state law that they all knew was a complete waste of their time. And so when we actually had our bill signing ceremony, usually when you have a bill signing ceremony that involves cities and towns, unless you're giving people money, it's kind of hard to get them to come. We had over 100 communities show up. And people were clapping like they were at a Springsteen concert. Because many of them knew how much time they were being given back because finally somebody got around to cleaning up all the goo that got in the way of their ability to do their job. And a lot of the work we've done in MassWorks, which we've significantly expanded and simplified and used as kind of the final stitch on all kinds of downtown development, housing development, economic development, and transportation initiatives, a lot of that came from talking to colleagues in local government. Our reg review project, which we thought was going to be an exercise in simplifying and streamlining regulations, permitting, processes, all this stuff, approvals for businesses. And yeah, we got a lot of feedback from businesses about it, but the biggest response we got on that came from cities and towns who said, if it takes me a year and a half to get an approval from you guys to do something on almost anything, I'm into my next town meeting, I'm into my next budget cycle, the cost of whatever it is has gone up, the time frame associated with putting it out to bid, blah, 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 blah. So we take very seriously this notion that you can't be a great state if you don't create great communities. Because in the end, there's 351 communities. They're all a little different, but it's important for us to do the things that are going to help them be successful. And if they are successful, we are successful, which is one of the reasons why we pay a lot less attention to the statewide unemployment numbers and the statewide job creation numbers, although those matter. But when that data comes out every month and gets updated and reviewed and corrected every quarter, what we pay a lot of attention to is the regional data and then the data underneath it. And the reason for that is because we want to know where the opportunities are and where we need to do more. And one of the best parts about the past 4 years is we've made progress in every county and in every region, and for the most part in every community in Massachusetts in terms of labor force participation rates, number of people working, unemployment rate, sort of all those key measures and indices. And we've worked hard to do that. I mean, if you look at where the Lieutenant Governor and I spend a lot of our time, she's been to all 351 cities and towns, which is sort of like DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak. I don't think that'll ever happen again. I've been to over 200, but the message is if the governor and lieutenant governor are spending a lot of time out talking to people about the things they need to do to improve the quality of life in their communities, cabinet secretaries get the message. And as a result, many of them have spent a lot of time working with their colleagues in local government around initiatives and issues that are important to them as well. And in the past 5 years, if you look at, we have a map where we have sort of MassWorks money, housing money, transportation money, environmental money, sort of like all of the major education money, all the major sort of funds that we have that we make available to enable communities to succeed. And we pin stuff on the map and basically say, you know, are we neglecting anybody? Where are we not focused? Where do we have holes on this map? Where do we need to think about adding capacity? And it's not just on that side of things, the investment side. We do the same thing with one of the first things we did when we took office around the opioid epidemic, which Senator Tran mentioned, was we took a look at where all our treatment capacity was. And if you just looked at the number of treatment beds Massachusetts had on a per capita basis, it wasn't a bad number. But if you actually looked at where the beds were located and where the issues associated with the epidemic were exploding, we had huge gaps around the Commonwealth geographically that we needed to do something about and to fill. And we've added almost 1,800 beds over the past 5 years and have tried very hard to put many of them in places where it was pretty clear we had work to do. And for the most part, that's the way we think about the gig. And I don't think there's much that's going to change about that. I do want to talk about some of the stuff we've worked on and then some of the stuff we're going to work on going forward. Obviously, I'm expecting you guys to get us an education bill sometime before the break, Senator. What do you think? I think most people in this room know that we are currently in the process of what I think of as Education Reform 3.0. Okay, Education Reform 1.0 was passed in 1994. It was the first time, former Senator Brewer would remember that one. That was the first time that Massachusetts really took a hard run at creating a foundation budget and a funding formula, state and federal or state and local funds, around what was, quote, an adequate level of funding for K through 12 education, and tied that to certain accountability measures and assessment processes. And what people forget is that when that bill got passed, Massachusetts was right in the middle of the pack nationally on the national education assessment exams. We were 25, 26, 24, somewhere in that general vicinity. Everybody thinks we were always number one. We weren't, okay? And then you literally follow that from 94 to about 2010, and you can just see Massachusetts moving up in the rankings over that period of time to the point where we've been number one now for the past 7 or 8 years. Education Reform number 2.0, was in 2010, and that was legislation that actually put some more teeth into things the state could do in conjunction with local communities around failing schools and failing school districts. And it led to, among other things, the receivership in Lawrence, which, for those of you who don't know much about that, Lawrence, The reason Lawrence ended up in receivership is because they were the lowest performing school district in Massachusetts on almost every metric. And the guy who became the receiver, who was appointed by Governor Patrick, was a guy named Jeff Riley, who came out of Boston. I've known Jeff forever. He's an incredibly smart educator and a guy whose entire career has basically been in urban education. And over his 6 years there, Lawrence went from being the worst performing urban school district in the Commonwealth to being one of the best. And he did a bunch of things that are hard to do in the absence of a receivership. It's a heck of a powerful tool, but it's also one you don't use lightly. He reduced his central office budget by about 30% and put all that money back into the schools. He counseled out about 50% of his principals and brought in new principals for about 50% of the schools. About 15% of the teachers left. He invested big time in professional development, lengthened the school day. He did a lot of very difficult but ultimately successful things. And there have been studies, many studies, independent studies done on the Lawrence success story. And that would not have been possible if it hadn't been for the Education Reform 2.0 legislation that got passed in 2010. This version that we're currently talking about, I think of as sort of Education Reform 3.0, and it's a big update on the funding formula that was created back in the 1990s, and basically provides significant resources in 4 categories that people felt were underinvested in. One is English language learners, the second is low-income students, the third is special education, and the fourth is the cost of health insurance for school departments, teachers, administrators, and the like. And it's a big, ambitious investment. It'll be on top of the current amount of money that goes just to deal with sort of the rising cost of living. It'll be about $1.5 billion in new money on top of that will go into the schools in Massachusetts based on significant investments in those 4 categories over the next 7 years. And with that, especially for, depending upon where the legislation ultimately ends up, there'll be some measurements for school and district performance that will be particularly important in those areas where schools are not quite getting it done on behalf of kids. But it's, in some ways, the third act of a play that will continue to sort of make adjustments and adapt to changing circumstances over time. But it's my expectation that at some point in the next few weeks, I'm really kind of hoping we're going to get that bill done. What do you think?
We're very close.
I hear that a lot from the legislature. We're very close. But I say all the time that when the administration files a bill, there are 2 people whose opinions are sort of the last act on the stage, and that's the lieutenant governors and mine. We're the 2 elected officials that represent the administration. When you talk about the legislature, you got 40 members of the Senate and you got 160 members of the House. They're playing a very different game with respect to actually trying to figure out how to get to yes. And then even if they get to yes on each of their sides, they still got to figure out a way to make it work between them, which I agree is complicated. I do want to talk a little bit about the healthcare bill that we filed last week. What you should know about it is it's 179 pages long. So I really hope none of you feel like you're obligated to read it. But it has a number of key elements. The most important thing we're trying to do in this bill is to create incentives. They're more than just an incentive, it's a nudge to payers and providers to invest more money in behavioral health care and primary care. And the reason for that is, if you look at the way the healthcare system is structured nationally, all the incentives are directed at technology and transactional medicine. And therapy and time do not get the same support that transactions and technology get. And this has been this way forever. And as a result, our system has done some amazing things in in the transactional elements of medicine and in technology. But that has come in some respects at the expense of therapy and time. And the reason that matters now is the changing nature of illness. We have much bigger issues with chronic illness now than we had 25 years ago. Part of the reason is because we solved a lot of the other issues we had on the acute side with the investments we made in technology and transactional medicine. And we also have much more significant and more prevalent issues around mental health. And part of that, again, is a function of what we've done in the other areas. For example, we've made tremendous progress on heart disease. We've made tremendous progress on cancer. We've made tremendous progress on a number of areas that historically were huge. They remain issues, but they were bigger issues for people in their 60s and 70s and 80s than they are now. Many people, their problem can be solved. Many people, their problem can be treated. As a result, when you get into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even your 90s in some cases, we have much more issues around brain disease and mental health than we used to have in our senior populations. Same goes with respect to the way we deal with behavioral health issues amongst young people, where we have far more issues there than we used to have once upon a time. And so a big part of this bill is to nudge the payer community and the provider community into investing into behavioral health and primary care, because if you look at where illness is going and you look at the nature of the populations we're serving, and if you look at the level of investments we've been making historically, those are areas we have underinvested in, period. We need to do something about it. The second big thing in the bill is a series of what I would describe as elements to deal with the lack of transparency that exists in pharmaceutical pricing. And we're actually kind of behind the curve on this one. Many states have actually done a lot of work with transparency issues around pharmacy benefit managers and prescription drugs, and more than 25 in many cases. And we're putting a series of initiatives out there that we believe will help us not only manage more effectively the rise in prescription drug spending, but also give us much better understanding about what it is that's underneath that. Because in many ways, that's become sort of a big black box that nobody really knows much about. And the third thing is a bunch of administrative cleanups around surprise billing, credentialing, in and out of network services, and that type of thing, which have really become for consumers a source of worry, frustration, and financial burden, most of the time in situations and circumstances where they did everything they were supposed to do and still ended up on the wrong end of the bill. And this bill basically creates a series of mechanisms and requirements for payers and providers that should clean a lot of that up. I do believe this legislation, if something like it gets enacted, will give us a more cost-effective and more patient-centric system than the one we have now. And I especially hope that we are able to make some of the investments we need to make in behavioral health and addiction services. I mean, the simplest way I can describe this is to say that under the system we have, it was much more financially beneficial for people to just write somebody a prescription for anxiety or pain or whatever it was and just keep writing them a prescription than it was to actually invest in the therapy or the time or the team-based approach to care to deal with whatever that person's situation was that could have helped them solve their problem or deal with it. And what we got as a result of that was the opioid epidemic, which we are now paying for in lives lost, families shattered, and financial expenses associated with trying to help people get clean and stay clean. That's just gargantuan. But hey, the way the system was set up, write the prescription. The system was not set up to say, help this person get better. We need to change that. The two other things I want to mention are also works in progress. One is a proposal that we made following up, frankly, on a lot of work we did with cities and towns around vulnerability planning. I was in Washington last February. We met with FEMA just to catch up on stuff, because FEMA was like the first federal agency I really got to know after we got elected, because 20 days after the lieutenant governor and I took office, it snowed for a month. So the FEMA people were pretty high on my list of good guys and gals when all was said and done. But they said that in the last 2 years, they spent $80 billion on disaster recovery, which was more than they had spent on the previous 35. And their point was, the game here has changed with respect to frequency and severity around storms, and that's just we're not going back to a different age or a different day. And they made a series of recommendations about how states should start thinking about this stuff, and one of them was about doing vulnerability planning, which we put money out there to cities and towns, again on a voluntary basis. We've got 270 of the 351 cities and towns do vulnerability planning with us, where we've helped pay for it. But it's basically designed to help them figure out what their single biggest issues are around storms and weather. And the reason for doing this is we are going to need to make some investments in this area, proactive, preventive investments to protect property, commercial property, private property, public property associated with this. And it's actually been a pretty interesting conversation with cities and towns, many of which have not really thought much about this. And it's not just a coastal issue. Everybody thinks I don't have to worry about that if I'm not on the coast, except that we have thousands of culverts in Massachusetts that were installed over the course of the last 150 years that were not built for the storms, either on a severity basis or the frequency basis we have now, and many of them fail. And when they fail, many of them are designed to sort of protect bridges, which get closed as a result of the failure of a culvert, downtowns, neighborhoods. I mean, culverts matter. I can't believe I'm saying that. Culverts matter, okay? One of the many things I've learned since I got this job, culverts matter. And by the way, we have thousands of them. And many of them, thanks, Mayor. It's not going to help you with your MassWorks grant. And we've put significant resources into, on a kind of episodic basis, to helping communities deal with the culverts that were most at risk. But we need to, as these vulnerability plans get developed, we need to actually create a mechanism to help pay for them. And we have a revolving fund that we proposed. Got to get it to the legislature. I think the Senate actually supports this. To put resources into a revolving fund that we can use with city money and in some cases private money, because guess what? In some cases the property we're talking about is private property as well as public property, to do the work that's required to prevent some of these areas from just becoming permanent floodplains on a go-forward basis. There are downtowns in a lot of places now, and there are parkways and roads where every time it rains, I mean literally every time it rains, they flood. The damage issues alone are ridiculous, but just think of the economic impact of having a downtown that floods every time it rains, right? And there are a lot of things you can do about this that are a lot more sophisticated than what people used to do. And our view is we really need to sort of get on the horse and start riding this one. And then the other thing I just want to mention is we have a $19 billion transportation bond bill in front of the legislature. I testified myself in front of the Transportation Committee on it. It's got $11 billion for roads and bridges and about $7 billion for public transportation. It's the biggest 5-year bond bill I think we've ever filed. I can't wait for that to get passed because it has an accelerated bridge reconstruction program that builds on the success of the previous accelerated bridge reconstruction program. It's got lots and lots of money in there to do paving and maintenance on not just state roads, but also on state-numbered local roads. And the reason I bring up state-numbered local roads is I'm virtually certain that most of the roads that drive you craziest in your own communities are state-numbered local roads. And the reason I know that is the locals think they belong to us and we think they belong to them. So, the Chapter 90 roads are local roads. People deal with those. locally, the state roads, we deal with them, but the orphans of the road system for a long time have been these state-numbered local roads. And they are, in many cases, hugely important to communities, but they don't get the attention they deserve. There's a bunch of money in this thing that's specifically designed for those roads. There's also funding in there to deal with what I call the 50 choke points, the 50 biggest choke points in Massachusetts, to do the design work and the work that's associated with dealing with those. And many of them, I mean, everybody knows where they are, and they're everywhere. I mean, what's interesting about the choke points is they really, if you put them up on a map, they're all over Massachusetts. They're not just all in one place. And that's a great reason to pass this bill separate from some of the others. And the money associated with the public transportation pieces will just build on some of the work we've been doing on our public transit system generally. We started from a terrible place on this one. Whole system been underinvested in forever. I think the year we got there, the total spend on the capital program of our public transportation system was like $350 million. It was about $875 million 2 years ago. It was $1 billion last year. It'll be over $1 billion this year, and it needs to get up to about $1.5 billion. And we have programmed for the next 5 years about $8 billion, and it's going into all sorts of things that are incredibly important and hugely boring. Signals. Most of our signaling systems are 50 years old, okay? They're mechanical, they're not even digital. Most of our switch technology is also 50 years old. Many of our tracks are 50 years old. They're supposed to be replaced about every 30 or 35 years. We've been replacing them. We've replaced over 250,000 railroad ties. As a result, we've been able to eliminate mandated speed limitations on many parts of the system. We have investments we need to make in stations. We have investments we need to make in bi-level coaches. I must be coming up on the end of my time here. Either that or no, I thought everybody wanted to talk about transportation. But the bottom line is there's a lot of terrific resources in that bond bill. You combine that with the transportation networking company legislation we have pending, which, by the way, in this year that we're in, transportation networking companies, Uber and Lyft, will probably do 100 million rides in Massachusetts. I mean, that's up from like 0 7 years ago. Really important element of our transportation system that there are a number of things in that bill that are particularly designed to pay attention to on that. And the final piece that we're working on with the legislature is a housing bill. And the simplest thing I can say about housing is we used to do 30,000 units of new housing every year for 50 years. In about 1990, we started doing around 10 or 12,000 units of housing, new housing. And some years we didn't even get to 10. And so literally for 30 years, during a period of time when our population's grown by about 600,000 people, we have not done much to create the housing infrastructure to meet the demand. And this affects us in a number of ways. Obviously, if you have a shortage, you drive up price because the price goes up if there's no capacity there and no inventory. But in addition to that, we've made it really hard for cities and towns to reimagine their downtowns. Downtowns historically have always been sort of anchored by retail, and that's always been the way cities and towns have created vibrancy. You can't really do retail anymore because you can do it as part of what you do, but it's hard to drive it all with retail because of the presence of online and alternative ways for people to buy stuff. So housing ends up becoming a big part of how you think about your downtown, along with office, hospitality, recreation, entertainment, and the like. And as an empty nester myself, my wife and I think a lot about, we would love to stay in the town we're in, but there just really isn't much there that would work for us. And I think that's true for a lot of people who are empty nesters. They're staying in the house they're in because there just really isn't a heck of a lot that looks like something they might want to live in somewhere in their community. And we don't want to leave the community we're in. We love Swampscott. It was great to us and to our kids. But, you know, how long are we going to stay in a house with a whole bunch of bedrooms that nobody sleeps in anymore? Of course, maybe they'll get married and have kids. But the point here is downtowns need to be vibrant. And for most communities, if you talk to them about what they think the future of their downtown is going to be about as they reimagine it, it includes a housing element to it. And we've made it really hard for cities and towns to do much of anything with housing. And I'm really hoping that we can get a bill passed that will make it easier for us to get back into the housing production business, because we really need to be. Listen to you, yeah. And then the final thing I'll say is, we've worked really hard as an administration not to worry about the 6 o'clock news, and to spend most of our time worrying about what I call the long game. What do you actually get done over the course of several years? How do people feel about whether or not you've gotten anything done? The hand-to-hand combat of the 6 o'clock news, I'm just not that interested in, because I don't think at the end of the day it creates positivity and momentum, and I think it does get in the way in some cases of actually creating positivity and momentum. My view on this is the Lieutenant Governor and I and the executive branch are one player in a democracy, and because we're one player, we don't get to make all the rules, and we shouldn't expect to. We certainly have our own views and opinions about what a fiscally disciplined and performance-oriented state government looks like, but in the long run, we should be measured on whether or not we actually achieve anything, and not on whether or not we won a few skirmishes on the evening news or in the daily papers. And I know that makes us kind of boring, and I've been told by many members in the media that we're the most boring administration they've ever covered. You got Netflix, you got all kinds of other places you can go for entertainment, and I'm okay with that. But I think in the long run, you and we get a better product if people are really focused on the work and not so much on who's winning what fight over what where. And that, for us, we believe has a lot to do with the sort of political climate that exists here, which is a pretty decent one, and it's one that I hope we can continue to pursue on a go-forward basis. And I thank you very much for coming out early in the morning, and I hope most of the leaves are down, and some kid in the neighborhood needs to make a few bucks to get them off your lawn. Thank you.